Other visitors arrived. The broken walls of the top stages of the mound, now shattered and exposed, provided a welcome and inexhaustible supply of easily accessible building material for the local Arabs, who over the years came from far and near to depart with as many bricks as their pack animals could carry. These bricks, fashioned by men's hands thousands of years before, still bore plainly the names of Ur-Nammu, the first great builder of the mound. In 1923, Leonard Woolley began carefully planned excavations of the area around the mound. His chief aim was not to start at the stage tower, from the moment the first stage struck the ground, an atmosphere of excitement gripped every worker. Each spadeful was like a journey into an unknown world where no one could foretell what surprises lay ahead. Suddenly, after months of digging, there emerged from the rubble solid rows of structures, row upon row of walls and facades, one after the other. As the sand was cleared away, there was revealed a checkerboard of dwellings, the ruins of which were still 10 feet high in places. Between them ran little alleyways, and after several additional months of hard work and the removal of tons of sand and rubble, the diggers were faced with an unforgettable sight. There before them lay a whole city, bathed in the bright sunshine, awakened from its long sleep after many thousands of years. Ur of the Chaldees had been found. It was a city of simple mud brick buildings, usually 1 story high, with 3 or 4 rooms surrounding an open courtyard, as was found in the extolled metropolis of Nebuchadnezzar the Great of Babylon. Instead, 1,500 years before Babylon, the citizens of Ur were living in large 2-story villas with 13 or 14 rooms. The walls were built of burnt brick, the upper ones neatly whitewashed. A visitor could enter through a small entrance hall containing a water basin to wash the dust of hands and feet. He could then continue on into an inner court, which was attractively paved. Round about it were grouped the reception room, the kitchen, living rooms, private rooms, and a domestic chapel. Up a stone staircase which concealed a washroom, the visitor would reach a gallery from which branched off rooms belonging to members of the family and the guest rooms. At the beginning of the 2nd millennium BC, Ur of the Chaldees was a prosperous, colorful, and busy capital city. We know little of the actual rites and underlying principles of the Chaldean religion, but there can be no doubt that the Chaldeans firmly believed in a future life after death. This can be seen by the great tomb of Queen Shu-ad of the early dynastic III period. Found in her tomb were the bodies of 70 court officials laid out in regular rows, close to a large cauldron that appears to have been used to prepare a poison. This poison was to be administered by the court priests to them as they lay in the tomb. The reason for this wholesale slaughter was that they lived only in the king's shadow, or in this case, the queen's, and they would follow her into the next world to attend to her there, and there the queen would be responsible for their well-being. Otherwise, they would have had a miserable existence if they continued to live in Ur, for no one would have employed them. The next ruler would choose his or her own friends and followers, and would not employ those of his or her predecessor. Although many of the tombs at Ur have been plundered in antiquity, and evidently by the very workers who placed the treasures in the tombs at Ur, as in Egypt, tomb robbing was a very ancient profession, and the men who followed it did not work at random, but had direct knowledge to guide them to that which was worthwhile. Hundreds of untouched private graves, whose contents were valuable for scientific archaeology, had no interest for the ancient seekers after treasure. Of the 16 royal graves found in the cemetery, only 2 were found intact. In a corner of a plundered royal tomb under debris, a remarkable discovery was made. Missed by the robbers was unearthed the now famous Standard of Ur. When found, it appeared to be a simple wooden panel that carried a mosaic of tiny pieces of lapis lazuli and shell. Although the wooden panel background had decayed, the mosaic fragments had sunk back into the empty space behind to keep their relative positions in the soil. So delicate was the task of removing the dirt without further disturbing the mosaic that only one square inch could be dealt with at a time. Each section was waxed as soon as cleared, but so much of the surrounding dirt mingled with the hot wax that the face of the panel soon became invisible. When the panel was finally lifted from the earth, Woolley recognized that he was faced with the problem how to restore what appeared to be this most important artifact from the past. Woolley had two choices: take the mosaic pieces bit by bit and remake it on a new background, a task that could be done by a modern craftsman as well as was done by the old. But then the panel would have been the work of a modern craftsman. The other choice was to use a restoration procedure commonly used in similar cases. Woolley chose the latter. What was done was this, quoting from Woolley's field report. The two sides of the panel were separated, and waxed cloth was fixed to the back of the inlay, and the face of it was roughly cleaned. It was then laid face downwards on glass, and warmed until the wax was soft. It was then pressed with the fingers from behind until, by looking underneath, one could be sure that each fragment of the inlay was in direct contact with the glass. The panel was now flat, but the pattern was much distorted, so that while some pieces overlapped, others were widely apart. The next stage was to remove the cloth from the back, leaving the mosaic virtually loose on the glass, then to pick out all the foreign matter. Then, by sideways pressure with the fingers, coax the pieces together. When this was done, fresh wax and cloth was applied behind and a proper backing fixed on. The result of this procedure was that Woolley restored the mosaic as the Sumerian artist had originally created it. The pieces of lapis and shell which he put together, no one else had taken apart and reset. Only when the panels were cleaned and had begun to take shape in the laboratory was their importance recognized. There were two main panels, rectangular, and measuring 22 inches long by 9 inches high, and the whole thing was fastened onto the end of a pole, and would have been carried in a procession. Digging under where the panels were found, Woolley discovered the body of a man who may have been the king's standard-bearer. A pole was actually found lying against his shoulder. The mosaic was found to be composed of figures, silhouetted in shell, with details engraved which were set in a background of lapis, accentuated in red. On one side, the king and the royal family are seen at a feast. They sit in chairs, their costumes consisting of old-fashioned sheepskin kilts or petticoats, the upper part of their bodies bare. Servants wait on them, and at one end of the scene a musician is playing on a small harp, while by him a woman singer with her hands to her breast sings to the accompaniment of the instrument. The figures form the top row of the design. In two lower rows, attendants are bringing in spoils, captured from the enemy, also food supplies for the banquet. One is driving a goat, another carries 2 fish, and another is bent under the weight of a corded bale. On the other side, in the center of the top row, stands the king, distinguished by his greater height. Behind him are 3 attendants, or members of his house. Next, a dwarf-like groom holds the head of 2 asses, which draw the monarch's empty chariot, while the driver of it walks behind, holding the reins. In front of the king, soldiers are seen bringing up prisoners naked and with their arms bound behind their backs, probably for the king to decide their fate. In the second row in the back comes the phalanx of the royal army. heavily armed infantry in close order, with copper helmets exactly like those found in the king's grave. They are holding axes in their hands, and in front of them are the lightly armed infantry, wielding axes or short spears, already engaged with the enemy, whose naked warriors are seen either fleeing or being struck down. In the lowest room, we have the chariotry of Sumer, each drawn by two asses and carrying two men. One is the driver, and the other a warrior who flings a light javelin, of which four are kept in a quiver tied to the front of the chariot. They advance over the battlefield, and by a naturalistic touch, the artist makes the asses in the lead walk sedately, while those drawing the other chariots become more and more excited as they encounter the corpses strewn on the ground, while those in front have broken into a gallop which threatens the balance of the riders. The Standard of Ur is a remarkable work of art, but it has a greater value as a historical document, for here we have figured the earliest detailed picture of that army which carried the civilization of the Sumerians from their earliest settlements on the fringe of the Persian Gulf to the mountains of Anatolia and as far as the shore of the Mediterranean Sea. From these pictures and actual examples from the royal graves at Ur, we know that their weapons were, both in design and manufacture, far superior to anything that their contemporaries possessed or any other nation that was to advance for 2,000 years. Their chariotry was to inspire an almost superstitious terror in the Hebrews later in the time of the Judges. Of all the great staged towers known as ziggurats, which characterized the cities of Sumer, that of Ur is the best preserved. The Sumerians who built it were originally hill people and worshipped their deities, among whom was the moon god Nannar. For this reason, they built temples at the summit of hills. In form, the ziggurat of Ur is a stepped pyramid having three stages. The whole hill is solid, the core being of mud bricks laid round and over the remains of the first dynasty ziggurat built by Ur-Nammu. The lowest stage, which alone is well preserved, measures at ground level a little more than 200 feet in length and 150 in width, and is about 50 feet high. From this rose the upper stages, each smaller than the one below. On the topmost stage stood the little one-room shrine of the moon god. Three brick staircases, each of 100 steps, led upward. One projected out at right angles from the building, two leaning against the wall of the first terrace, all converging in a great gateway between the first and second terrace. From this gate, flights of steps ran up to the second terrace as far as the door of the shrine. As Wooley's draftsmen started drawing out the plan of the ziggurat as the excavation progressed, they were puzzled to find the different measurements never seemed to agree. It was finally discovered that in the whole building there was not a single straight line. What was thought to be straight lines were in fact carefully calculated curves. The walls not only sloped inwards, but the line from top to bottom was slightly convex. The ancient architect had aimed at an optical illusion which the great builders of the Parthenon and Athens were to achieve many centuries afterwards, the curves being so slight as not to be apparent, yet enough to give the eye an appearance of strength where a straight line might by contrast have been plain and ugly. As designed, the slope of the walls lead the eye of the beholder upwards and inwards to the center. Then the sharper slope of the triple staircase accentuates that of the walls and fixes the attention on the shrine above, which was the religious focus of the whole structure. By the spade of the archaeologists, the ancient city of Ur emerges from the shadowy past as the capital of the Sumerians, one of the oldest civilizations in Mesopotamia, now Iran and Iraq. As we know, the Sumerians were not Semites like the Hebrews, but when the great invasion of Semite nomads streamed out from the Arabian desert a little before 2100 BC, The Hebrews' first encounter with the Sumerians was the extensive holdings of the people of Ur, their houses, farms, canals, and most importantly, their wealth from trade. Although it appears that Terah was a citizen of Ur, the Bible indicates that his son Abram was a tent dweller, living the life of a typical nomad, moving with flocks from pasture to pasture and from well to well. It also appears that Terah was associated with idolatry and served other gods, as we read in the book of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 2. However, when Abram left his country, taking his wife Sarai and his fatherless nephew Lot, his father Terah also accompanied him, as is recorded in Genesis chapter 11, verse 31, which would suggest that Abram, who was of the household of Shem, and who had been brought up in the fear of the Lord under the influence of his mother, had converted his father Terah to the worship of the one true God. Over 4,000 years ago, Terah, Lot, and Abraham called Ur their home. It was at Ur that Sarah became the wife of Abraham. No doubt he and Sarah walked the streets of Ur and gazed up to the great temple to the moon god on the topmost platform of the ziggurat. We are not told in the scriptures the reason Abraham had to leave his native land, but we are given full information as to God's plan concerning him and his descendants, who were to be God's servants, formed to establish his kingdom on earth. In Genesis we read, "Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed."
What are you guys thinking?
Thanks for listening, guys.
What are you guys thinking? It just like literally kicked me right on out. That was talking about the Chaldeans and the information on Abraham and Lot. I told you guys I want you guys to really understand what's going on with a lot of this stuff. They keep trying to make you guys not understand the Bible. The Bible literally is part of history. The New Testament being the contorted part to conform the minds of men when coming to the nations, trying to assume so on and so forth. The New Testament is about a lot of histories, the cosmos, information stuff relating to health, so on and so forth. We have to really get out of these religious mindsets and the thinking on religion, because if you're thinking on things in the religious aspect, you're not going to get the information from it. You're not going to be able to coincide what's really going on. So I don't know. I just think that's important. That was actually something I just shared from another person that I reached out to on certain information, and I thought it was pretty information. I thought it was pretty informative when it comes to the Chaldeans, the Sumerians. He started off talking about Melchizedek as well. There was a little more to that. I actually just brought you guys into it a little later. I just thought it would be interesting for you guys to hear it. I probably should have just started in the beginning. It was really early. I wasn't even thinking about going live. I have a live schedule for this evening, but I definitely wanted to make sure you guys were, listening to that. I thought he was going to play a little bit more, but that was just going into some of the details and the information. And I hope you guys understood or heard the part about the people actually being built from the ground up, pretty much. There's so much more to that, but yeah, we're going to be getting into a lot of this stuff as we talk about some of the information I'm going to be bringing later. That is actually going into the corporation, let you guys see and understand where the corporation came from, the placement, so on and so forth. The America in itself, is a total separation, obviously, from the United States. So there's the U.S. They try to say the USA, but it's the U.S. of A. The U.S. of A is because it's a part of America, an incorporated part, a colonized part that has been put upon the nation to actually keep you under a servitude system of slavery. A mental entrapment, keeping the mind unaware of the truth and reality, being able to walk into law, standing in yourself, knowing who you are, and the riches that you were born into. So there's a lot with that. We just got to be so aware of everything and make sure that we are getting ourselves in the right places to stand in who we are, because right now this whole system has fallen. Like, it's not failing, it's failed. It's been failed. And it's been a failing system that has fallen to the ground, pretty much burned to the ashes, and it's up to you to take those ashes and do something with. It's up to you to be able to know how to shift and move through them without getting too much soot on your face. So, I don't know if anybody wanted to say anything. I'll put the link out there real quick for any of the ladies or anybody else that may want to have a comment on anything we just heard before I get up out of here. Give you guys a few minutes to do that. If interested, you could definitely do that. Um, any comments or questions or anything. So when it comes to that, I'm going to say real quickly, give you guys a few minutes if anyone has a question or wants to make a comment at all. When it comes to all these different historical pieces of information, we're deceived behind the indoctrination. So the only way to come out of deceit is to see it in a different aspect by looking at the truth, unveiling the truth, bringing it to the open. Yeah, since it was real quick, sis, I wanted to. I was actually in a group with some people listening to this recording, and it's never really been heard. It's kind of a something that someone dug up from somewhere. I can't remember where they said, but either way, and it was really interesting going over a lot of historical information. Even listening to it, it was showing how, the Bible, the information was interpreted in the Bible where it's there, but it was interpreted as a religious aspect. It was really deep. I wish I would have, thought to include you guys earlier. When I heard him start talking about the Melchizedek in that recording, I decided to go live and just let you guys hear a bit of it. But definitely very interesting. The gentleman that actually was playing the information, he's going to be a guest. I don't know when. I haven't had time. I was supposed to do it one day this week. I have not had time to reach out to him. I haven't even had time to do my own live like I wanted to. I was interrupted day before yesterday, I believe it was, and yesterday. So it's a lot of stuff been going on. So I'm going to definitely go more into this information, guys. It'll be more in depth because when I have the guest up, I'll probably ask about this particular recording and we'll go from there. All right, so nobody had any questions, anything they wanted to say. It was going to be a short and sweet one. Just all depending on how long that recording continues. All right, guys, peace, love, and blessings. Until later, make sure you're tuning in at 9 Central Standard Time. I'm definitely going to have a very good piece of this information that'll kind of show you a lot of clarity in what's going on right now. So make sure you don't miss that. Peace, love, blessings, and I'm out.